everybody was ticked off because of what went down in the Royal Rumble. And seemingly, it's a funny situation because Roman Reigns won the Rumble. He got the right to go to Mania and face Brock Lesnar. But a large part of the audience was behind Daniel Bryan. They wanted him to get that shot because he was stripped of the title. But he got eliminated early. So I guess the thing is, there's so much confusion to me with the fans, or not confusion, but it's almost like kayfabe has died.
Yeah, I mean,
because how do you book a thing? Back in the day, you would watch the product in the ring, and whatever happened, that's what you got your heat or your satisfaction from. Now, if the story doesn't go the way that people want, then you have people saying, oh, they're mad at behind the scenes, the writers. So how can you book in a non-kayfabe business these days?
It's tough. I think that's the hardest thing that you have to do. And, you talk about keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on. There is that different component of the internet and people being smarter to the internal workings of the business. The second they see us getting behind somebody and starting to push them, I think is that, there's a group of fans, and I hate to use the term because I think it's overused and people complain about it as like the vocal minority or whatever. It's not a vocal minority, but listen, you know as well as I do, back in the day, with the exception of a few guys that were really, really in the upper echelon and just over no matter what, you or certain guys, there were towns that you went to that you knew they're heels. This is a heel town, right? They're going to like the bad guys. They're going to not being as enamored with the good guy. A white meat babyface was dead in the water in those towns.
Right.
In essence, you were a heel. You're 90% of your run, right? But you were the heel that was against the establishment, and at times changed. The way people look at it changed, but that component of just telling a storyline and people accepting that storyline for what it is as a storyline is gone, because a large portion of your audience just buys into that. And then another large portion of your audience, they know everything that goes on every 5 minutes of every day. They know more about what's happening sometimes than we do, right? And I think you get to a point where they just want to go the opposite direction, or they want to see a certain thing. They believe a certain type of thing is what works. I can tell you, when they're towns now, at TV, and they're giving Roman a hard time, and they're booing him out of the building because they believe that's the push he's getting. But then you go to, and then just this past week, the live events we were at, there wasn't a person booing him in those buildings.
Well, it's interesting because, he goes on to win the Royal Rumble. And I was in the same situation way back in '96, King of the Ring. And, you were originally going to win that thing.
Yeah.
The Click hugged in MSG, Madison Square Garden, broke kayfabe, and you took the hammer, and they put the punishment to you.
Yep.
I won the event, and I got a big push. And when Vince came to me and said, hey, man, in 2 weeks, you're going to go over in the King of the Ring. And I said, okay, cool. Now, I didn't say to him, hey, man, there's been guys here that are been here longer than me, so maybe they should do that.
Yeah.
So when Roman Reigns gets the word that he's going over in the Rumble, what's he supposed to say?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. He's like, hey, man, I don't think I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
This is a business where sometimes you got to put your big boy britches on and go to work. And a portion of the crowd feels like he hadn't earned it yet. And so when the finish went down the way it did, and maybe they could have booked the finish a little bit better in his favor and overcome different odds, and I mean that with due respect to all the guys in the ring, but made him work for it a little bit more than he did. But he ended up getting the heat out of that and the resentment from the fans because they were mad at the writing staff.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, and I'm not trying to. The beauty of what makes WWE work is they're one man. One man calling the shots, right? And that's Vince. And it's the beauty of what we do, because unlike places where there's been booking committees or a large number of guys setting things up, when you have one guy calling the shots, trust me, that Royal Rumble was debated and, poured over and gone through with, and there was a lot of suggestions. But the beauty of it is you got one guy that takes all those suggestions, boils it all up, and that's the direction you go in. That's Vince. And that's Vince today. And is he perfect? Nope. Am I? No. Is the writing team? No. There's a lot of ideas. We choose what we think will be best at the time, and we're trying to read where everything's going to go. But he'd be the first guy to say, he doesn't always make the right call. But that being said, you know him as well as I do. He got a pretty damn good track record.
That being said, was tonight a reflection of him having his finger on the pulse and what transpired happened?
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden we've got Daniel Bryan, who had a hellacious match with Seth Rollins. Shout out to both those guys, but all on the line tonight. So Daniel Bryan versus Roman Reigns in Fastlane, and the winner goes on to face Brock Lesnar. So then, he took the pulse at the Rumble. There was some, was it the... Man, I even hate to say the smart marks, but everybody's smart these days.
Yeah.
So they jumped on the bandwagon early, and so this is Vince reacting, having his finger on the pulse, and making another move to play another card.
Well, I think you can look at it however you want, as far as saying the business has not changed. A smart promoter, a smart booker, a smart story writer reacts to, you and I did it in the ring live every night, right? We never talked about stuff very often. We just went in the ring, and if they weren't buying something that they bought the night before or whatever, we went in a different direction. We made an audible, we called an audible, we went in a different direction. That's what this business is. That's why, to me, it's the greatest form of entertainment there is. We can change directions at the drop of a hat. We can also work that direction. We can also make them feel like we're going away, get them another way, move a certain way, and people can look back at it afterwards and say, well, they would have done that if we didn't do this. That's the way it's always been. If they don't cheer for Hulk Hogan and go crazy for him in Minneapolis and do all those things, Vince doesn't bring him here in order to do what Vern wasn't doing with him. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And to make Hulkamania happen. Was he listening to those fans? Absolutely. He was calling all that stuff as it went. Same with you.
Right. Watching that crowd tonight, I was wondering, who would get the strongest reaction, and both guys got strong reactions. I was back here and couldn't really hear the full effect of the crowd, but it's supply and demand. And it seemed like for a time there, people really wanted Roman Reigns, and they were giving him Roman Reigns. And then, not so much. Daniel Bryan comes back and they want Daniel Bryan, and, you got a supply of each. Then they started demanding more Bryan, and he kept giving Roman. And the people started getting a little hot. And again, he got the resentment towards that.
Yeah.
So it's
tough. It's tough. It's a tough environment now. It's a tough, people will say all the time about Cena, like, I read that all the time. Because don't we listen? People are tired of Cena. They don't want to see him anymore. They don't want to see this. There's such a long period of time where half the people were booing John and half the people were cheering for him, but he was packing arenas.
Right.
He was selling more merchandise. He was more popular than ever. Everything that we did, John was so far ahead of everybody else from a reaction standpoint. It doesn't matter if half the people hate him, half the people love him. I think that there's it's difficult now to find the person that every single person, from young to old, from teenage kid, the Attitude Era, in a little bit of it was almost easier. We had a tight demographic. We knew what we were looking at. We were looking at kids. We were showing them, the things that.
So what are you looking at now?
It's different, right? Because you've got a 10-year-old kid sitting in the crowd, an 8-year-old kid sitting in the crowd. Next to him's a 22-year-old with all his buddies that are they want to see something totally different. But then you got the mom and the dad, and then you got the grandparents. We go across every single age group, every single race and religion and everything else. You cross so many barriers that it's hard to say, oh, this is the one guy that everybody's going to like this guy. You know what I mean? Everybody's going to like that, and then he's the good guy, and that guy's the bad guy. Because half that crowd's going to like the bad guy. Half that crowd's going to like the good guy. Almost worst thing you can do right now is make somebody a good guy.
But in today's day and age.